I've been meaning to talk about this for a while now. Not because I think anyone can help. More because I've started forgetting parts of it, and that scares me more than what happened. I worked at the Arroyo Fuel Center from March through September of last year. It sits about 40 miles east of Barstow off a stretch of highway that doesn't have a name people use. The DOT designation is CR 117, but the dispatchers just called it the cutoff. If you're hauling between Las Vegas and the Inland Empire and you want to skip the 15 through Primm, you take the cutoff. It saves about 40 minutes if the road is clear, which it almost always is, because almost nobody takes it. The Arroyo isn't a truck stop in the way you're picturing. There's no subway inside. No showers. No rows of idling Peterbilts. It's a fuel island, 4 diesel pumps under a flat steel canopy, a small building with a register, a coffee station, a cooler with sandwiches and energy drinks, and a back office barely big enough for a desk. Out back there's a gravel lot where maybe 6 or 7 trucks can park if they're careful about it. Beyond the lot there's nothing. Just scrub and sand and the kind of darkness that doesn't thin out when your eyes adjust. I took the job because I needed something that would leave my days free. I was doing online coursework for a surveying certificate, and the shift was 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., 4 nights a week. The pay was $15 an hour plus a small commission on fuel sales that never amounted to much. My manager was a woman named Deb who ran the day shift and left me a nightly checklist on a clipboard by the register. Restock the cooler. Wipe down the coffee station at 2 a.m. Log fuel purchases by pump number. Lock the restroom at midnight and unlock it at 5 for the morning traffic that didn't really exist. The first 2 weeks were exactly what I expected. Long stretches of nothing punctuated by the glow of headlights pulling off the highway. Most of my customers were long-haul drivers who didn't want conversation. They'd fuel up, buy a coffee or a pack of smokes, and pull around back to sleep for a few hours. Some of them I recognized by their trucks after a while. A blue Kenworth with Oklahoma plates who came through every Tuesday. A white Freightliner with a dented fender who always bought 2 of the turkey wraps. I want to be clear about something. Deb never gave me a list of rules. There was no laminated card. No strange instructions taped inside a drawer. What there was a conversation. One conversation, on my 3rd night, when she stopped by around 11 p.m. because she'd forgotten her reading glasses in the back office. She was on her way out when she turned around in the doorway and said, "You'll get some that come through who aren't hauling anything." I asked her what she meant. No trailer. No load. Just the cab. Driving the cutoff alone. She put her glasses case in her purse. You don't need to do anything special. Just don't go out to the island while they're fueling. Let them come inside if they want to. And if they don't come inside, don't watch them from the window. I laughed. She didn't. I'm serious, Marcus. It's not a safety thing. It's just, they don't like it. I asked who they were. She said she didn't know. She said the woman who'd had my shift before me, Patrice, had told her the same thing, and Patrice had gotten it from the owner, a guy named Lyle Hendon who I never met in person. Deb said Patrice worked the overnight for 11 years and never had a problem because she followed the advice, and Deb asked me to do the same. I said okay. She said good night. That was it. Now, I need to explain what the cutoff is like at 2 or 3 in the morning, because it matters. The highway runs east-west, and the Arroyo sits on the south side. From the front window of the building, you can see the fuel island, the canopy, the first 30 feet of the lot, and then the highway stretching in both directions until it disappears. There are no other lights. No other structures. The nearest town is a census-designated place called Ludlow that's technically 19 miles west, but functionally it's just a Chevron and a Dairy Queen off the interstate. Between here and there, the desert is flat and open and absolutely silent. On still nights, when no trucks were parked out back, I could hear my own breathing in the room. The fluorescent tubes above the register had a faint whine that became the loudest sound in the world after midnight. For the first month, I didn't see a single bobtail. That's what they call a cab without a trailer. Every truck that came through was loaded. And I started to think Deb's warning was just desert superstition. People who work alone in remote places develop rituals. I understood that. Then in April, around 2:40 a.m. on a Wednesday, a cab pulled off the highway and onto the fuel island. No trailer. No markings on the door. It was a dark-colored conventional, I want to say black, but under sodium lights everything dark looks the same. The cab pulled up to pump 3 and stopped. The engine cut off. I was behind the register with a textbook open. I looked up when I heard the pump island ding. Each pump triggers a small chime inside when a vehicle pulls up so I can authorize the fuel. I saw the cab sitting there. No trailer. I remembered what Deb said. I authorized the pump from the register, which I could do without going outside. Then I stayed where I was. The pump ran for a while. Longer than I expected for just a cab, but I didn't think much of it. I heard it click off. Then nothing. The cab sat there. 5 minutes. 10 minutes. I didn't look. I kept my eyes on my textbook. I could feel the window to my left and I did not look through it. I want to be honest, it wasn't because I was afraid. It was because Deb asked me not to, and I respected Deb, and the request was simple. So I read about geodetic datums and waited. At 3:04 a.m., the cab started again. I heard it pull off the island, and the headlights swept across the front window as it turned back onto the highway heading east. I looked up then. I saw the taillights dwindling into the dark. That was it. The pump log showed 87 gallons of diesel to pump 3. That was more than a cab's saddle tank should hold, but I figured I'd misread the log or the pump was miscalibrated. I wrote it down on the nightly sheet. Deb never mentioned it. The second time was 3 weeks later. A Friday, around 1:15 a.m. Same situation, bobtail, no markings, dark paint. Different truck this time. I could tell because the shape was different. The first one had been a conventional with a long hood. This one was a cabover, flat face, cab sitting right over the front axle. You don't see many cabover on American highways anymore. They're more common in Europe and Australia. This one looked old. The lines were boxy in a way that made me think 1980s. Same routine. It pulled to pump 2. Engine off. I authorized the pump. The fuel ran. The pump clicked. The cab sat. This time, I timed it. 14 minutes of silence after the pump stopped before the engine restarted and the cab pulled away. 127 gallons on pump 2. I stared at that number. A cabover from that era might have twin 50-gallon tanks. Maybe 75 if they were aftermarket. 127 was impossible. I started a separate log. Just a spiral notebook I kept under the counter. I wrote the date, time, pump number, gallons, and a brief description of the cab. I told myself I was being practical. If the pumps were malfunctioning, Deb would want documentation. That's what I told myself. The third visit was on a Monday, May 5th, at 3:33 a.m. 3:33. I've gone back and forth on whether the timestamp matters. Probably not. But I wrote it down and now I can't see it without feeling something. This time, the cab didn't pull up to a pump. It pulled into the lot behind the building. I heard the engine, diesel, heavy, the low growl of something with serious torque, and then the crunch of gravel as it rolled around the side of the building toward the back lot. Then silence. No pump chime. No fuel request. Just a truck, parked behind my building, at 3:33 in the morning. I sat very still. Deb's instructions had been specific to fueling. Don't go to the island. Don't watch from the window. She hadn't said anything about the lot. She hadn't said anything about what to do if one of them just parked. I waited. I could hear the tick of the building's metal roof cooling in the night air. The fluorescent hum. My own pulse, which had picked up in a way that annoyed me because I didn't think I was scared. 20 minutes passed. I got up and walked to the back office. The back office has a small window that faces the lot. I didn't turn on the office light, it was already off, so I'd be looking from a dark room into a dark lot. I looked. There was a cab parked in the center of the lot. No trailer. Dark paint. A conventional, long nose, like the first one. But not the first one. This one was bigger somehow. The proportions were wrong in a way I couldn't immediately name. It sat there, engine off, no lights, and for a moment I felt like I was looking at something resting. Not parked. Resting. I watched it for maybe 30 seconds. Nothing happened. No one got out. No interior light came on. The cab was just there, occupying space in the dark. I went back to the register. At 4:01 a.m., I heard the engine start. Gravel. The cab pulled around the building and back onto the highway, heading east. They always headed east. I went out to the lot at dawn, after my shift. The gravel where the cab had parked was depressed. Not in two lines, the way tires leave tracks. In a single, wide, even depression. Like something heavy had been set down and picked back up. The depression was roughly the shape of the cab's footprint, but the gravel was pressed down uniformly, as if the weight hadn't been distributed through wheels and axles but applied all at once, from above, straight down. I took a photo with my phone. When I looked at it later, it just looked like a patch of gravel. You couldn't see what I'd seen. I deleted it. I called Deb that afternoon. I asked her if Patrice had ever mentioned the trucks parking in the back lot. There was a pause. Sometimes they do that, she said. Why? Patrice said they're resting. The drivers. Another pause. Longer. She just said they're resting, Marcus. She didn't say who. I asked if I should be worried. Deb said no. She said in 11 years, Patrice never had a problem, and Patrice wasn't a nervous person. She said to leave them alone and they'd leave me alone, and she said it with the exact cadence of someone reciting something they'd been told. I want to stop here and say something about how I felt during this period. I wasn't terrified. I wasn't losing sleep. I was interested. I was a surveying student. I liked measurement. I liked anomalies. The fuel numbers didn't add up, and the gravel impression didn't make sense, and I wanted to understand why. Fear is what happens when you think something might hurt you. This felt more like standing at the edge of a system that was operating on principles I hadn't learned yet. I wanted to learn them. That feeling is gone now. I want to be clear about that. Through May and into June, the visits became more frequent. At first it had been every few weeks. Then weekly. Then, by late June, I was seeing a bobtail 2 or 3 times a week. Sometimes at the pumps. Sometimes in the lot. Always between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. Always heading east when they left. I kept my notebook. Dates, times, pump numbers, gallons. The fuel quantities kept climbing. 87, 127. 203, 341. 341 gallons into a single truck cab. I pulled the pump logs the next morning and cross-referenced them with the digital meter readings. They matched. Pump 4 had dispensed exactly 341.6 gallons of diesel between 2:47 and 3:12 a.m. 25 minutes. That's a flow rate of about 13.7 gallons per minute, which is within the normal range for a commercial diesel pump. The fuel went somewhere. It was just nowhere a truck cab could hold it. In early July, I made a decision. I know now that it was the wrong one, but I don't think I could have made a different one, because I'm the kind of person who needs to see things. I needed to see. July 8th. A Tuesday. 2:20 a.m. The chime sounded. I looked up and saw a bobtail at pump 1. No trailer, no markings, dark paint. I authorized the pump. Then I walked outside. The night air hit me first. Dry, still, warm even at that hour. The desert holds heat in the ground and lets it go slowly, so at 2 a.m. it's still radiating up through your shoes. I could smell diesel. The pump was running. I could hear the mechanical heartbeat of the meter counting gallons. I walked toward the island. My footsteps on the concrete were very loud. The cab was 15 feet away. Then 10. Then I was standing at the back of it, close enough to touch the rear panel of the sleeper compartment. The pump nozzle was in the fill port on the left side, and the pump was running, and I could hear the diesel flowing. I looked at the cab. Up close, the wrongness I'd felt from the office window was sharper. The proportions were off. The sleeper compartment was too long relative to the hood. The wheel wells were too deep. The paint wasn't black, it was a very dark color that didn't reflect the sodium light the way paint should. It absorbed it. The surface looked matte, but not the way primer looks matte. More like the way skin looks matte. There was a texture to it that I couldn't resolve under the orange light. I put my hand on the side panel. Warm. Not engine warm. Not desert air warm. Warm the way a living thing is warm. And under my palm, very faintly, I felt a rhythm. Not the vibration of an engine, because the engine was off. A rhythm. Slow. Maybe once every 4 or 5 seconds. A deep, soft pulse. I pulled my hand back. The pump clicked off. I stood there, and I became aware of something I can only describe as attention. Not a sound. Not a movement. The cab didn't change. Nothing opened. No one looked at me. But the quality of the air around the truck shifted, the way a room changes when someone who was asleep opens their eyes. Something was aware of me standing there. I walked back inside. I sat behind the register. My hands were shaking, not violently, just a persistent fine tremor that wouldn't stop. I pressed them flat on the counter and waited. At 2:38 a.m., the cab pulled away. East. That night, I sat in my car in the lot after my shift ended and watched the sun come up. I didn't start the engine. I didn't look at my phone. I just sat there and tried to understand what I'd touched. I couldn't. I went back to work the next night. And the next. I didn't touch another cab. I followed Deb's instructions. They came through, they fueled or rested, they left. I stayed inside. I stopped keeping the notebook. I didn't want to document it anymore. Documentation felt like engagement, and engagement felt like something I was being quietly invited into, and I didn't want to accept. But the thing about working alone in the desert at night is that you have a lot of time to think. And the thing I kept thinking about was the fuel. 341 gallons. Where did it go? And the thing I kept thinking after that was, what if it didn't go into a tank? What if the truck was drinking? I didn't like that thought. I pushed it away. It came back. It came back every time I heard the pump chime and saw a dark cab sitting on the island. In August, two things happened. The first was that I started seeing the cabs during the day. Not at the Arroyo, I never saw one during my shift that came before midnight or stayed past 4 a.m. I saw them on the road. Driving to work, driving home, running errands in Barstow. I'd be on the highway and a dark bobtail would pass me going the other direction, no trailer, no markings, and I'd feel that shift in the air. That attention. Like being noticed by something that had been watching the road and seen me and recognized me. It happened 4 times in August. Each time, the cab was heading east. The second thing was the fuel delivery discrepancy. Every 2 weeks, a tanker came to refill the underground storage tanks at the Arroyo. Deb handled the delivery schedule and the invoices. In mid-August, she called me during the day, which she never did. "Marcus, have you been giving away fuel?" I said no. The numbers don't work. We've sold 4,000 gallons more than we've pumped in since June. The tanks should be empty, but they're reading full. I didn't say anything. The meters are showing sales that the deliveries can't account for. Either the pumps are wrong, the tank sensors are wrong, or we're selling fuel we don't have. I told her the pumps seemed fine. I told her I'd check the sensors. I didn't tell her about the bobtails. I didn't tell her about the impossible gallon counts. I should have. I checked the underground tank sensors that night. I used the manual dipstick, the way Deb had shown me during training. You open the fill cap in the concrete pad, lower the calibrated stick, and read the fuel level. Both tanks were full. 10,000 gallons each. They'd been filled 4 days ago. The pumps had dispensed, according to the meter logs, roughly 6,200 gallons since then. The tanks should have been at about 13,800 combined. They were at 20,000. Full. Both of them. As if they'd never been pumped at all. Or as if something was putting fuel back. I lowered the dipstick again. I pulled it up. I looked at the wet line. Full. I lowered it a third time. Full. The diesel on the stick was the right color, the right viscosity. It smelled right. It was diesel. I crouched there on the concrete pad with the dipstick in my hand and I looked out at the desert. The scrub and the sand and the dark. And very far away, on the highway, I saw taillights. Red pinpoints heading east. And I knew, not guessed, not suspected, knew that it was one of them, and that whatever was happening with the fuel was part of the same system I didn't understand. They were drinking. And they were feeding. The Arroyo was not a truck stop. The Arroyo was a station on a route that I had no map for, and the fuel was bait, or food, or part of a biological process that looked like commerce because it had learned to look like commerce. I worked 2 more weeks. In those 2 weeks, I stopped counting gallons. I stopped checking tanks. I did what Deb asked, stayed inside, didn't watch, didn't engage. The cabs came through. They fueled. They rested. They left. East. Always east. On September 3rd, I found a deposit in the gravel lot. It was early morning, just after 6, and I was walking to my car. One of the cabs had been in the lot overnight. It arrived at 1:40 and left at 4:15, which was one of the longest rests I'd recorded. In the spot where it had parked, there was a dark stain on the gravel. Not oil. Not diesel. Something thicker, closer to the color of transmission fluid but without the chemical smell. It was warm. And it had soaked into the gravel in that same uniform, pressed-down pattern, no tire tracks, just a single even impression. I crouched down. I shouldn't have. I know that now. The stain was spreading very slowly. Not like a liquid flowing outward. Like something growing. The edges were reaching into the surrounding gravel in thin tendrils, and where they touched a stone, the stone darkened and softened. I watched a piece of granite the size of my thumbnail turn the color of liver and lose its edges over the span of maybe 90 seconds. I stood up and went to my car and drove home. I didn't go back. I called Deb that afternoon and told her I was done. She didn't ask why. She said she understood. She said Patrice had taken a 3-month break in 2019. She said the job would be there if I changed my mind. I didn't change my mind. That was September. It's been 7 months. I finished my surveying certificate. I work for a civil engineering firm now, outdoors mostly, daylight hours. Normal. Except 3 weeks ago, I was on a job site outside Victorville. We were surveying a drainage easement along a county road. It was 2 in the afternoon, broad daylight, hot, loud with highway traffic. I was looking through the total station, that's the instrument we use for measuring angles and distances, and I panned across the road to check a reference marker on the other side. A dark cab was parked on the shoulder. No trailer. No markings. Engine off. Just sitting there in the sun. I took my eye off the instrument. I looked at the cab directly. It was there. Real. In full daylight. And on the side panel, in the place where a company name or DOT number would be, there was a mark. Not painted. Not a decal. It was a discoloration in the surface of the metal, or what I'd thought was metal, and it was roughly circular, and it was approximately the size and shape of a human palm print. My palm print. From July 8th. The cab sat there for maybe another minute. Then the engine started, except it didn't sound like an engine starting. It sounded like an exhale. And it pulled off the shoulder and onto the road and headed east. I haven't seen one since. But I've started checking the fuel gauge in my car, and it's wrong. It's always wrong now. I fill the tank, drive 50 miles, and it reads full. I drive 100 miles. Full. I drove to Phoenix and back last weekend, 400 miles, and the needle didn't move. I haven't bought gas in 3 weeks. I don't know what it means. I don't know if I was marked, or chosen, or infected, or thanked. I don't know if the thing I touched on July 8th left something in my skin or took something out of it. I don't know what they are. I don't know where they go when they head east, or what's east of the desert that something like.